But Dean, for the theme of tonight's show, you haven't given us any kind of hint about where you stand and what you believe. Do you want to give us a sense of, I assume you're a Christian, and maybe why you are so?
Yeah, so I am a Christian. I have been for about, what has it been now, 15 years. I grew up kind of in and out of church, and then I believe deployed to Iraq, came back, had a pretty significant existential crisis from about 2006 to 2008, where I, kind of wanted to survey and picked up Hitchens, picked up Dawkins, picked up Loftus, all those guys, and sifted through their stuff. And, also did the same thing on the other side, picked up, Guilty as Charged. The first book I picked up was, what was it? I think it was a Norman Geisler book from way back when. And then it was Craig and Moreland. And decided that the weight of the evidence was for Christianity, and has really been a firm Christian since about 2010. So,
is there anything in there that you think that you could present that is why should Jimmy and I be believing? What does is there a linchpin in there that you think, this is great evidence, and if Paul and Jimmy knew more about it, they would become a Christian too?
I think there could potentially be, but I wouldn't. If I wanted to get you guys to Christianity, I don't know that I'd, go straight for the jugular with the resurrection. I'd probably try and get you to be general theist to begin with, and that would probably be my heavy lean on something like the Kalam argument.
Go for it, I say.
Oh, okay.
Give it a go.
The Kalam argument is that whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Pretty straightforward, deductive syllogism.
Right. Well, except for all you have, all the Kalam gets you to, if we're using your version of the Kalam, there is a cause, not a God, but a cause. But then also, when you take a step down into theoretical physics, you actually find out the concept of that, if it is following some sort of universal law, would only begin at the beginning of the universe. So the beginning of the universe itself wouldn't necessarily have to have a cause, or maybe it would. We have no idea. But this isn't actually an established axiom that I. So as far as the Kalam goes, for me to believe in God, I have to accept the premises, and I don't.
Okay. Well, I would say to your first point about the conclusion, there's really two pieces that's there for the Kalam. The first is, one, does the first and second premise, are they true? That leads to the conclusion. The third premise, and third premise, what Craig does is he moves to conceptual analysis and says, okay, well, what could this cause be? So I agree with you that the third premise doesn't say, and therefore God. But what Craig does is he makes a conceptual analysis with regards to the third premise to conclude that it would be a timeless, spaceless, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, personal being, which, some people would say that's a core definition of God, regardless of, at least in the three major religions. But
again, going off on the third, going off on the third doesn't really matter, because if we can't get past the first, where the version of the first one that I would say I agree to the point that seems to be true would be everything within the universe that exists has a cause. But then we're even talking about a total difference of when we're talking about the concept of actualization. The actualization of, say, helium elements in the core of stars still has some universal precedent, as in it existed in some other form prior, but now we're saying that helium had a cause. Now we're talking about even as we're establishing that, the universe itself going from a state of no precedent prior to now having things that are causing other things to be, for lack of a better term, created, but through natural methods, which are caused by their precedents. So we're talking about a thing without a precedent going to, though your suggestion is that the universe itself has the precedent of the God who created it, and you obviously abandon the Kalam the moment we start talking about the origin of the God. And so even for yourself, your Kalam has limits, and for me, I don't accept the first premise unless you change it to everything within the universe.
Well, I think just within the first premise, you could say something like the causal principle, which is a metaphysical principle. I think it was Aristotle who said, "Out of nothing, nothing comes." So it seems like if you were to reject the first premise, you would have to either say, or there'd probably be three options. One would be the universe is, or at least probabilities. Three probable conclusions would be: the universe is eternal. The universe had a beginning and has a cause, and then do conceptual analysis on that cause, or say that something could actually come into being from nothing. That instead of saying out of nothing, nothing comes, you would have to say out of nothing, something comes, right?
And what did Aristotle mean when he said nothing?
Three options.
How did Aristotle define nothing?
Nothing is a universal. What Aristotle means by nothing is a universal negation, no thing, right?
Yeah.
So
my problem is the actual concept of nothing would be impossible to describe. The moment you describe it, it fails to be nothing. And so it's a concept we can't actually get our mind around, much like the concept of eternity. So once again, and I love when people do this because it's almost like I dare you to disagree with this wise man of years past who, in some cases died doing incredibly stupid things. Not necessarily the case. I don't remember how Aristotle died, but is often the case of these people who they often invoke. And where I'm at with this is, Dean, what it sounds like you're saying is that to a reasonable skeptic to get to this conclusion, you would have to have this incredible advance. You'd have to accept these premises on the idea that we even can evaluate these premises with our current level of scientific knowledge when we're aware of all of the gaps, but we also know that those gaps haven't been closed by scripture. They've been closed by science, and that's where they are in a state of closing but aren't closed. But you would have to have these tremendous assumptions. You'd have to accept these tremendous premises. And so I guess I have to wonder if we can only do that now or within the last few decades because a reasonable skeptic would get there. It sounds to me like the argument that you think justifies God and then Christianity would not have been accessible to the overwhelming majority of Christians who have ever existed and believed in him.
Oh, well, first, I think that's an incredibly, loaded statement that you just made there as far as the analysis. But as far as Christians not accepting this, I mean, this goes back, this type of argumentation goes back, not just to Christians, but this at least this general concept of, God being the, first cause of the universe goes back to Al-Ghazali in the medieval time frame, Philoponus, even before that.
I have no doubt that the further you go back, the more popular. I don't think that what you're saying contradicts anything I was saying. I have no doubt that the further you go back, the more even the most brilliant minds thought they had to fill the gap with God.
No, but that's the point. They're not just saying, well, we don't know, therefore God. They're making good, sound, technical, philosophical arguments for things.
So your argument that this is accessible to the average Christian from the past was that people you consider the most brilliant minds in the past believed it, which is
No, it's not me. Not me. It's across the spectrum that.
Right, but we're talking about you and why you believe in God. And so far, we've gotten to you would accept the premise of the Kalam, despite the fact that you can't actually demonstrate the first premise. So, and I did say I would stand back. So let me let Paul get a word in edgewise, because I feel like I'm taking over a little bit.
Well, where you real quick before Paul jumps in here? Well, why is it? Why is it? It seems to me you're surprised that philosophers in the past, even Augustine on, it seems like you're saying, well, there's all these gaps that we can't prove. There's all these things you would have to demonstrate. When all they're really doing is they're inferring from the natural world the most probable outcome with regards to things like time, actual infinities as opposed to potential infinities, and reasoning that because these things at least seem to be problematic with regards to an infinite universe, therefore there must have been a beginning. It seems like you're surprised by these things, and I am
as impressed by the most brilliant minds from the past. Dean, I get it. Dean, first of all, I'm not surprised by the philosophers. Mostly, I'm unimpressed, and I am and this is the thing that so many theists who love these things like the Kalam, who love these philosophical, Dean, who love these things where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to speak to you on objective terms. I'm going to invoke the names of these incredible philosophers. I'm as impressed as the most brilliant minds from the last, 3,000 years before 200 years ago, and their ability to make conclusions on the natural world based on the available data as existed as that time. I am as impressed as I am with anti-vaxxers who are also making it with the data that they are, granted, self-limiting themselves to, but limiting themselves from. So it's not a method. The thing that you think I am surprised by isn't the position of these philosophers. The thing I'm surprised by is that you think this is a compelling argument, because you sound smarter than this argument. I'll now let Paul take over as I had promised.
Well, Dean,
I'll
you gave me your,
hopefully before I get out of here.
You gave your breakdown. You said the universe is either eternal or there was a cause, and I forget what your third thing was. I guess where I am at with this whole Kalam and where the universe exists is that no matter what everyone gets down to, there was a brute fact. Basically either the brute fact was God or the brute fact was something else. And as I stare at this, I don't understand why the brute cause isn't matter and energy. What is more compelling about the brute cause, the brute fact, pardon me, the brute cause was completely the wrong phrase for me to use. It gets down to a brute fact. Brute fact God, brute fact there's a universe. And then when we're talking about causation, we know that causation requires time. And if we're talking about if the universe in your version of the Kalam is our instantiation of space-time, our particular instantiation of space-time, we can't really say anything meaningful about before time. Like, just before time as a concept is rather incoherent. We don't know what set of space-time might be the superset of our set of it. So basically, it's conjecture. And I don't deny that there is eventually we get to a brute fact, but I just don't see why matter and energy is a less likely brute fact, which is basically what Stephen Hawking came to, versus this God. So to me, it comes down to, well, here's this thing we can't know, but this flavor of it I like, and that flavor of it you like, and then we're kind of sitting nowhere. That's where I kind of sit with the Kalam. Go ahead.
Right. So I see what you're saying, Paul, and I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong here. What you're getting at is ultimately from our current position, nobody was there. If the universe had a beginning, or let me put it in another way. I don't want to be I don't want to infer that my position is correct. But ultimately, none of us can have a privileged position of the expansion of a duration of time to see whether or not there was a finite beginning in the past of the universe, or if the universe has just been around for forever. So,
or even if forever is a coherent concept, right? Because we don't know what a universe without time looks like. So like you can't throw a second law of thermodynamics at me. It's like, well, that requires time. So I don't know. Anyway, carry on.
Right. So the question, so where you and I are both left at is, all right, well, we can only go off, what is the most probable explanation based upon the data that we have. And I think you do make a good point that at some point we do come to this brute fact, and there's two options on the table. Either it is matter and energy, or something else like a first cause. And so I think where I guess my objection to matter and energy would be that, when you look at matter and energy, you would say, well, let me ask you the question. Would you say then that matter and energy are actually infinite, that matter and energy has been around for forever? I guess would be my question.
Well, I guess I defer to Stephen Hawking, who says that the idea of time before the Big Bang is either incoherent or not something we can know. So it doesn't require an infinite necessarily if time doesn't apply in the same way prior to our instantiation of time.
Okay, let me ask you a different question then, but kind of in the same stream. So What do you think about the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem that's always talked about here, where they say regardless of classical or non-classical space-times and description, any universe that's been expanding on average throughout its history must have had a beginning, must reach a boundary point, and that would apply even if there's something behind that boundary point, so to speak, like a vacuum.
I think our
instantiation
of space-time, had a start point, had the Big Bang, as is colloquially called, is the start of our instantiation of space-time. But that tells me nothing about what we're the subset of.
Okay, so you're saying that there's
that's the problem I have with all of this stuff, is that most cosmologists don't think we came from nothing. Like Frank Turek's always like, well, you can't come from nothing, or William Lane Craig or whoever. And it's like, I get so angry because that's not what the cosmologists think. Even in the 100-year-old version of there was a singularity before the Big Bang, like that idea. That's if I fight with Christians, because that wasn't the idea that there was nothing. No, there was a singularity. There was something that expanded. So I guess I just don't. I'm with Jimmy. I don't buy the idea that there ever was no thing.
Right. So you're saying then that you're not, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that there was no point where there was a absolute nothingness, right? Where there was literally no thing, but rather there was matter and energy in some I don't know how to say it. Some bigger.
By invoking the word always, though, we've already gotten back to the concept of before time.
What about before time?
You're using the phrase always again, which is a descriptor of time, and we're still talking about the concept of whether or not that's even reasonable to discuss prior to the Big Bang, which, as far as we know, was the invocation of time.
Well, Paul seems to be.
I just don't know that it's a coherent.
Exactly.
Is Paul indicating that he believes that there's something more than the current space-time reality that we occupy?
Yeah, I believe. Well, yes, I think there's a cosmos. That's what most scientists describe as our particular universe. And more and whatever else there is, whatever material realm is outside of our particular universe. And I think most not only most cosmologists, but even I've talked to other Christians a lot. Of like William Lane Craig actually accepts that even if there's other universes, or if you can wrap the idea that the singularity, that's generally called the cosmos. That's what scientists use to describe it, and so I think it's entirely plausible that our universe is a subset of the cosmos. Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. If I'm able, if we have time, what if you change?
That's up to Jimmy.
The first.
Yeah. One more good reason to believe in a God. Let's do that.
I wanted to switch up the first premise of the Kalam, but to see if that would be more palatable. But if you want another,
let's do it.
Another reason.
I've been presented with probably 500 versions first premise of the Kalam, and none of them that get to there is a cause and that cause is likely a God has ever compelled me. So let's just jump to another good reason to believe there's a God besides the Kalam. Also, I think Paul can argue the Kalam a million times better than I am, but I think the Kalam has also been argued a million times better than the three of us here can accomplish.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I would just say that as of right now, I think the only other thing that I'd chase the rabbit on would be the resurrection, but currently, I don't know that I have the time to go in on that, since my wife just called me from upstairs, and
that's okay.
I don't know what's going on. So
we'll pick it up next time. Then I'm excited. I'm excited for. I hope I'm present.
Next time I call in, if Paul's on, I'd love to talk resurrection with Paul. If that's cool.
Sure. I hope I'm there too, and I want you to know that the challenges I will have when you start comparing it to making reasonable inferences, like about whether or not somebody committed a murder or something, is keep in mind that your murderer is a wizard, and you have to convince me of that too. So I'm giving you a heads up if I'm there of what the standard is, because that's the one that people love to bring in from the line of arguments that I seem to be associating you with. All right?
No, I won't.
Thanks, Dean.
I won't use a murder scene. Okay. All right. Take care, guys.
Sounds great.
All right, bye.
We'll see you, Dean. Yeah, that's the argument I always see with you gather the evidence and stuff, and we talk about it certainly with geology and whether or not Noah's, but like that there's this concept of discovery and how you look. And so like one of the books that Dean had actually invoked, I'm trying to remember what the title was, but the premise is like they're putting the existence of Jesus on trial, and they find him guilty of existing, and they're trying to use this same sort of legal standard, which is already so flawed, but they're trying to use it on the basis of like what you would normally associate with you have proven a person exists, but with a magic fairy man who can fart universes into existence. It's like, it's a little different. The standard's a little higher.